The Growth Happens Dawn to Dusk podcast with Matt Devitt. He talks with people about their journey, where they succeeded and failed to help others on their quest. We're all on a journey that starts and ends every day. This is when we grow between dawn and dusk. And now, your host, Matt Devitt.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Growth Happens Dawn to Dusk podcast. This is Matt Devitt bringing you another fantastic, always in my opinion, fantastic episode with an interesting guest that we have by the name of Daniel J. Edwards, who is a voice actor, does voiceover work. He's also been on Broadway. He sings, he dances, and he's really, really insightful when it comes to how to look at and kind of take on that perspective of moving up within the arts and that business, and how he's changed his perspective along the way that has really helped him to be more successful over the years. So hope you enjoy this conversation I have with Daniel, all over the place, talk about a lot of topics as I think you would expect from me by this time. Now, without further ado, almost forgot to do a little self-promotion. If you guys like this, definitely share, give me a like, subscribe, a 5-star review. I'm definitely enjoying reading the feedback that I'm getting from people. So again, thank you for all of that. And so now, without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Daniel J. Edwards. Daniel, welcome to the Growth Happens Dawn to Dusk podcast. Thank you for your time. Really, really looking forward to talking with you today.
How's it going, Matt? Thanks for having me. I got to say, first off, that introduction, Matt Devitt's podcast, that's pretty dope.
Well, I appreciate that coming from somebody that does the voice acting and voice over work. Good to know that actually hit the mark. And of course, truth be told, I didn't do that. Went on Fiverr and found somebody with far more talent than myself and had them produce that for me. But thank you very much. So Daniel J. Edwards, family connection, which has been great. You and I have known each other for quite some time. I've seen you on Broadway. I've listened to your voice in movies, doing voiceover work, and all sorts of other items from the creative and artistic realm. So I'm going to have to pose the first question to you, since you've had such a broad background of items that you've worked in. When people walk up to you and they ask the whole, what do you do? How do you even broach that conversation with them? How do you get that started?
I still don't really know how to navigate that other than I say, well, I'm an actor primarily, an actor and a singer. And then if they're interested past that, then I just say I specialize in musical theater and voiceover work, particularly for kids animation. And if they go further, I say things like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And video games and stuff like that. And that's usually as far as it goes.
No, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, it is one of those hard items because you never quite know when the person asks, like, is it just the in passing? So what do you do? Or do they really want to dig into it? So when would you say you got started on the path of the overarching term that you used, which...
I'm sorry, what was that?
So getting started into acting, when do you think that got started? When did you really get started into that? And when did you decide to make it a career?
Oh gosh. Well, I think, for most artists in general, it starts at a young age. You like the attention that you get from doing something, whether it be emotion or mimicry, or for me, it was mimicry. I would watch the Disney movies and replicate that, like Winnie the Pooh. And, I'd sit at a piano and listen to someone play it, and then I'd try to replicate it. So for me, it was mimicry at a very young age. I found that I liked what other people were doing on, I guess Lawrence Welk was a big one. There's a lot of cool, tap dancing and singing and stuff, so I tried to replicate that. And I would get a good response from the family. And so I just kept doing that, and I found joy in that. So I tried to pursue that. So I'd say probably 5 years old.
Okay, so this is something I guess you've been working on. Maybe not striving towards is the right idea, but working on, and it's always been top of mind to you as far as moving down that acting path. So when, well, so then, okay, so you've been working on that for a while. I'm assuming you stayed that way all through high school and even after high school. So what was that transition from mimicry to I'm going to do this as a career? Like, do you remember a moment when that kind of clicked in your head of like, oh, I'm doing this for life, as opposed to just I'm doing it to copy?
Yeah, I think towards high school, like my junior year after my second session at Interlochen. So Interlochen is a fine arts camp in Michigan that specializes in music and acting and singing and stuff. And I went there once and I thought it was fun but really challenging. I thought this whole life thing was just a fun thing. I don't know where I got that from. I don't know where my life goals were put in order. But that's just kind of how I saw it. So it wasn't until like junior, senior year of high school that I was like, oh no, I need to pick a profession, and what am I good at? And oh, I'm just dancing on stage and singing and doing all this. Oh, sorry about that. It said I was muted.
Oh,
Can you hear
nope.
me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Where did I leave off? I'm sorry.
Oh, the whole part where I kind of was snickering in the background, which is probably a good thing I got muted when you said you were just singing and dancing up on stage, which of, somehow I got, it's raining men in the back of my head. I apologize for that. I
That's funny. That's kind, that was a weird, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't until like high school where I kind of felt like, oh, I need to hone this and either make this a craft or ditch it, because that's when people start focusing on college, the ACTs, the SATs, figuring out what they want to do with their lives. And for me, it was like, oh, what am I good at? Well, I'm a singer, I'm a dancer. I think I can act maybe. Let's try for musical theater school. And this was just because I was like, what do you do when you add those things together? Because initially I wanted to just be a dancer. I guess that was the furthest I've ever gone in a semi-professional kind of endeavor. But I wanted to do all of it, so I just added it all together, and it's a musical theater. So that was when I got serious, and I started applying myself to musical theater colleges, and from there it jetted off into this career. But yeah, for me, it was never like I'm going to be on stage and be amazing. It was like, oh, what do I do? I'm going to do this, and then it ended up being that, which is great. I think that's how real passion is derived from. It's like, I love to do this. I don't know how to do this professionally, but I'm going to go with the only path that's given. And oh, look, it's a career now. So at least for artists, I think that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like what you ended up doing was just trying to find opportunities to continue the repetitions and then
Right.
see where it went. It just seemed like you were looking for opportunities of like, okay, I like this, so where can I do this the most? And at that point, you can figure out, okay, am I really good at this? Is it going to go somewhere? Does it open you up to opportunities? So how did you find some of those early opportunities opening up to you? Like, what did those initially look like? When you started applying yourself to more of the theater and the dancing and so on and so forth.
Well, I think the cries for attention were what really got me into the specific field. Like, I remember, I think my parents' first realization that I should not be playing sports was when I was, on the soccer field or the baseball field doing cartwheels and dancing and putting on a show for everybody, I guess. And they were like, yeah, you're kind of wasting the sport, so maybe you should take a dance class or something. So I started with tap class because of that. I don't know, that outreach of dancing and sports. And so I feel like the same happened with singing. One day I was like, you know what, I think I want to try singing, and I feel like I can do it. So I would mimic people like Josh Groban, or people like I don't know, other singers like Elton John. And then the parents were like, oh, so you can do that, so maybe you should take voice lessons. And I think being at an early age and figuring out what I was good at, from as an actor, I think that's the most important thing, to find that as soon as possible and just start training. Because when you get to the city, you realize that as much as the degree is helpful, it doesn't really matter. It just matters if you're good at it or not. And so I guess the most important thing for me was just learning how to train and what to train at an early age, so I could, by the time I got to college, I could focus more on the things that I was particularly good at within that field, and then just fly with it.
So as you started to narrow down, and maybe not really narrow down your field, but start to really focus on what you wanted your craft to be, do any items that you wanted to get into, what I'm kind of getting at here is, did you have any beautiful disasters where, I really wanted to do this, didn't work any way you thought it was going to, but in the end, something really good came out of that experience? And I'm thinking you might have come across those because of the number of times you've either been, potentially auditioning or trying out for something, or even once you've got it, going through and really honing the character that you're trying to bring life to. Do you have any of those beautiful disasters that come to mind?
Oh man, my whole career is a beautiful disaster. It's in the best way possible. You set your goals on something so specific, and you look at the percentage of the possibilities of getting that specific trajectory of what you want, and it's so small. And my ego gets in the way all the time, and I'm like, I don't care about those percentages. I'm amazing. And then I go into an audition or to the skill, the job that I want to do, and I realize, oh, there are 1,000 people here that also want to do that exact same job. And I think just seeing that is to this day, I'm still learning that it's always eye-opening, and it's always like, well, you have a specific thing you want to do, and you can keep trying for it, or you can keep your horizons a little broader, and then adapt from seeing the realities of it. So if you don't get this part, you can still if you're still willing to do this part in the same company, then you have more chances of booking something. So instead of me saying, I want to be this part in this show, now I say, oh, please just put me in this show, or please put me in this set of shows like that are on a touring company or something, just so I can, broadening my horizons in that aspect just really do help me achieve what I want. As far as beautiful disasters go, it's just like you set your heart and soul into something, and you don't get it, and then you say, what do I do now? So for example, I wanted to become a soloist on stage, and I realized that in this climate, and if you want to go into the politics of being an Asian guy, I would be more than happy to go in that with you, because that's a whole other bag of cats. You realize your purpose isn't really an existing thing until you make it your purpose. It's really hard to navigate through this topic. Actually, I'm sorry if it seems like I'm
no.
So.
What's interesting is the part that I pulled out of that in just the conversation was how you switched a mindset, if I'm hearing you right, like your mindset when you went into something, instead of getting so focused on, I must have said title, or I must have said character. You started looking at it going, okay, I want to have said experience. I want to be open to these new opportunities. And so by making that shift in your head, did that allow for more opportunities to open up to you, just because you were using a new filter which to view the world from or through?
It did. Yeah, for sure. And I think filter is a great word for that. It's I think knowing your limits is a dangerous thing to say, but also knowing knowing your potential is something in the future. Knowing your limits is the now. And so I didn't go into the world of musical theater thinking that I was an Asian guy, that I was a certain height, that I was a certain build, that I was a certain voice type. I only went into it thinking I just want to do these cool jobs because they're the leads and they're getting all the attention. But you have to factor in, especially as an actor, your type. And whether or not you want to change that is up to a slow progression of you trying to do that while staying in your type, because you can't break out of your type if you're only typed. So for me, it was, I have to accept that I am an Asian guy. I also have to accept that I'm not an Asian guy because I was adopted and I have no idea what, the culture is of being a real Asian guy. I have to accept that I have a low voice, even though I want to do all these roles that are, that sing higher. At least for now, until I can mold myself into a more flexible singer, I have to stay in the lower singing type, which does limit you to certain things, and it does change your perspective of what's real in the business and what you can improve on later. So, yeah, I would say just facing hundreds of auditions and failing terribly have helped me realize that in order to succeed in this business, you have to really broaden your horizons, and you also really have to accept where you are now, and then the change comes later.
So on the adventure, because I like to use that word when we think about life and the directions that we go. So on your adventure thus far, let's say you and we met at the airport, and I actually decided to keep peeling that question back with you. What do you do? Where have you been? What has been, and it's kind of weird in my head, I've got this chutes and ladders game going on right now, as far as the direction your career has taken. So what does that look like over the last 5, 6, 7 years, as far as, just a high level, what you've worked on and moved between, just because I think the audience would be really interested in the fact that initially you started with a very narrow focus, but I mean, again, the family connection, you and I have known each other for a long time. I know it's been anything but that very narrow focus. So what have been some of the items you've worked on over the last, 5, 6, 7 years?
Oh, wow. A lot of stuff, actually. I think coming from a dance background, even though I now find that I'm not as passionate as or not passionate at all as a dancer, I use that tool to get into the doors of a lot of auditions, which led me to an immediate success of a Broadway show, and it was called Anything Goes, the revival. It happened in 2011, the beginning of 2011, and that was shortly after I graduated at the end of 2010. I think that tool helped me get a perspective of the industry of musical theater, and after I saw that perspective, it was so intense for me. I decided to kind of shell in and just look for other things that I was passionate about too as backups, and I think that's where voiceover came along. The industry, I feel like after the Broadway show, I felt broken after that show, just because it was high intensity. It was at almost the highest caliber you can get in terms of musical theater, and I'm very grateful for that. But at the same time, I almost feel like I wasn't ready for that, just because I didn't have the levels working up to that job. It was just immediate job. And through learning the limits versus my ego of what I wanted, it was hard to handle. So I discovered voiceover shortly after, and I pursued that because I felt like I was good at that and I could hide behind something else that already existed, and just share my other talents of mimicry through that. So that was how that door opened, and I think the door opened in the right time for me, but in the wrong way for me. We can go into that if you want. Am I answering your question right?
Yeah. No, yeah. Don't ever worry about answering the question right or wrong. I mean, this is all really, really good insight. So, yeah, so if you want to, go ahead and go into that point a little bit more. It sounds like you feel like there's a nugget in there worth finding and talking about.
Sure. So I know now that voiceover for me is a tool. It is a tool and an art that I'm good at and that I like to do and that makes me happy, and also is something that I feel like can project art at its truest form, because if you're doing voiceover, that means you usually have an artist that's at least mixing it. That means that you have an artistic artist that is drawing it. You have a storyteller, you have everything. And so that collaboration of art is very celebrated at its core, and I really do like that. And on top of that, being an Asian American man, that doesn't matter in voiceover. It just matters what you sound like. So to me, that was freeing and liberating, because I wasn't pigeonholed as the Asian kid who can dance. I was typed as, oh, he has a deeper voice that can do funny cartoon character, sounds. So he's versatile. And I think that feeling of versatility helped me tremendously gain some confidence in my ability to project other things besides, I don't know, that Asian American man, stubborn guy who, is young and has to learn a lot. So that tool opened up through that experience of you're not hating musical theater, but really like I felt pressured, too much pressure from that industry. But what I will say about it is I looking at it that way as an scapegoat versus looking at it as a tool to enhance my craft, I think handicapped me, because then I quit doing musical theater for a small stretch of time. And I think I could have been a lot more productive. But I guess that's the journey of life, right?
Right. And more than likely, I guess you could always find a way to get back into it. It seems like getting that first job was somewhat of a mixed blessing, right? Super exciting, but at the same time, I don't think, from hearing you, it doesn't sound like you expected to be shot out of a cannon either, into the entertainment world.
Right. I don't know if do you follow UFC by any chance?
UFC, you mean the
Ultimate Fighting Champion? Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
So there's a guy.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Ben Askren. I don't know if you know him. He's this Olympic level wrestler who recently got destroyed by another Olympic level wrestler, Jordan Burroughs. And Jordan Burroughs says there are levels to these things. And I feel like Jordan Burroughs and Ben Askren are both heavy influencers on me, at least now, as of the last year or so, because it shows the levels that you go through in order to achieve the greatness that you try to get. And unfortunately, I felt like me hitting the Broadway level right away, I'm skipping the levels underneath. So instead of me getting to, build up the level, I actually feel like my trajectory to this point of my life was I hit the top and then I had to go back down to the bottom and start over and level up the middle part. So that journey was very strange, and it still feels pretty strange to me, but at least now I'm getting the flow of things and I'm understanding my place and understanding where to go next.
So within the experience, and I've got two questions that I'm bouncing around in my head, and we'll see if we can hit both of them. Mm-hmm. The one is, as you've been developing your skills throughout this, it doesn't sound like this is something you've done, on your own. Yes, you're the one doing your work, but as far as like skill development, figuring out where you can get better, I'm assuming you haven't done this all on your own. Like you've worked with other people, maybe coaches or mentors, or am I way off?
No, I don't think you can grow as an artist on your own. I think whether or not you acknowledge the fact that you've taken knowledge from other people is up to the ego of the artist. But I think mentors could be as simple as a podcast. Like, I started listening to the Joe Rogan podcast about a year ago, And
Mm-hmm.
that has changed my, perception of just thinking in general. He has so many cool people on, and so many, different avenues of things to think about and look at. And that helps me broaden my horizons to what's possible within my own art, because it shows the hard work and dedication that goes into crafting a human, or crafting a pathway. So I would say there were a lot of mentorships, in quotes, that I've gone through, and I've also taken a lot of voice lessons. I also have a lot of friends who help guide me back on the path when I feel like I'm falling off the path. But art is a very strange and unique thing, where it's not a formula that will help you succeed. It's just a formula that might. And there are 5,000 formulas, and if none of them work, it's not necessarily because you're not qualified or, right for it necessarily. It's just you weren't in the right moment. So yeah, I would say I had plenty of mentors.
So how have you went about, selecting them? I mean, it sounds like there's a good amount that's, passive mentorship. The podcast comes to mind, and I listen to a lot of podcasts for the same reason. I want to get some different perspectives, and it's when else am I going to ever have, Elon Musk sitting in my car? Well, never, but I can listen to a podcast and get his perspective, right?
Right.
So there's that passive kind of mentorship that's out there, but how have you actively selected either coaches or mentors?
Well, for coaches, it's you look up the qualifications in order to achieve what you want. So, for example, if it's a voice lesson, I want to be able to sing with less tension in my throat. I'll go online and look at people to see their qualifications for how they teach and what they teach and why they do it, and then I'll just choose from them. And or I'll ask my friends and say, hey, do you have voice lessons or voice coaches? So it's more about shared information and just taking a chance on a person that has qualifications. It's like going back to school. And then if a mentorship buds from that, that's great. As far as mentorships within the industry, unfortunately, I have one guy. He means a lot to me. His name's Jason Ma. Shout out to him if he ever listens to this. I hope he does. He's always been there as a friend and as a director and as a composer, and somebody who's very versed and successful in this business. He's always had my back and tried to steer me in the right direction. But even with that, I feel like, unfortunately, as an artist, it's so individual. Unless you are an exact copy or so similar to somebody else that can help guide you through their journey of success to get you there, you have to find it yourself. So I feel like if I have to go to mentors, I have to go back to my roots of growing up, like my parents and like my family in general. Like everyone in my family, I think, for the most part, were very hard workers. And, there's a lot of like toughness to my family that I feel like is missing in a lot of artists' lives. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but just in a positive way towards mine. So for me, my mentors were my family, and my wife as well. She always keeps me in line and keeps me in check with my attitude, and she's also a very advanced singer, so she helps me train my vocals. That's primarily how I find mentors.
Yeah, and that's actually pretty interesting, because it sounds, and this is where I think it's different than, let's say, the businesses or engineering from my standpoint. Like if I'm looking to get better at project management for large cement plant outages, I can find somebody that has experience in exactly that thing with really close to my background, and I can work with them and mentor under them. Whereas it sounds like from your standpoint, you actually use more of the hired gun or the coach when there's an area you either want to shore up or make a whole lot better than everybody else. That's where you get really specific. But other than that, it sounds like you just try to take in as much feedback in the environment as possible, and then sift through it and figure out which points, okay, I'm going to keep that one. That's a good little bit of knowledge. I'm going to hold on to that. And everything else, you just throw to the side.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's unfortunate. You know, like the mentors that I wish to have are all celebrities. Um, and that, that's kind of hard to reach out to them. Like one of the people I was fortunate enough to work with, and I still have his information, and time to time we'll talk for a short amount of time. I don't know if you know who BD Wong is. Have you heard of him?
Name's familiar.
He
Anyway,
was,
yeah, go on.
he's a very intelligent actor. He's very different. He has a deeper voice. He's Asian American. He's very, very similar to me. And when I worked with him on a couple projects, I just felt this resonance that I haven't felt with a lot of other people, just because I feel like he's gone through a similar thing. But unfortunately, he's a celebrity, and so there isn't really any time to mentor someone like me. And not to say someone like me is unimportant as a person, but like, he's a celebrity. So I don't know. It's it's hard to have mentors in this field.
Yeah, time is also a premium for those items. So what is it? Is it just the fact that he has such a close background to yourself is definitely one of the reasons that you kind of like to there's an expression a while back that I heard where somebody was talking about, if I could be around great people, kind of like what you're talking about, mentors and those that you really want to be around. I'd love to be, a waiter at the table, just to walk around the outside and just listen to the discussion, if that's all I could get. It almost sounds like what you're looking, is that kind of what you're looking for with BD, because it is such a similar background, but really, even if he wasn't actively working with you, like, you just want to have as many touches with that person as possible, just to, again, see what you can pick up and see what's worth implementing.
For sure. Yeah. Like, if you're an engineer, or, I mean, since you're an engineer,
I am.
Elon Musk comes to mind,
Yep.
You're an awesome engineer at that. I keep up with your social media. It's very inspiring. But yeah, Elon Musk comes to mind. I think he's a hero of mine too. I think he's a hero of everybody. I think he's an everyman hero. But like, in specifics, like, he's he makes awesome stuff, and he's very successful at it, and he makes millions and millions of dollars, but all he cares about is the work, and doing as much as possible to forward human longevity, and to forward the mechanics. And I think through that alone, it's just I want somebody like that in my life. But unfortunately, I'm finding that as an actor, you're kind of a mimic, or a pawn to what's real. So everyone therefore becomes your idol after a certain point, which is liberating, but at the same time not helpful when you need specific things in your career. So it's hard to separate who inspires you from who will help you get to the next level. Like, as much as I love Elon Musk, I don't think he will, his expertise will be able to help me forward my specific qualities that will help me get more jobs in the future. I think his mentality of just do it over and over again is the only thing I can really take from that, other than he's super successful and awesome. So yeah, it's really hard. I find as an actor, it's really hard to find people, or idols, or people to cling to grow with. And I find that more and more that you have to be that person yourself. And that's kind of shallow in a sense, but at the same time, I feel like that's the life of an actor.
I wouldn't actually call it shallow. I think it's an interesting introspection on the self, of understanding that in the end, like, you have to figure out, what's going to motivate you. What are you going to learn from your own experiences? It's the difference between a person that, reads a book about doing push-ups and somebody that actually does push-ups, right?
Right.
And so I think it's kind of the part of, maybe you've hit a point where now you've done enough push-ups that you can actually look back at that, and you can start extracting those bits of knowledge from your own experiences, as opposed to trying to see them from other people. And it's an interesting transition. It's something that I've been going through for the last couple of years, having been in heavy industry and engineering for, over 15 years, you reach a point where you're like, okay, I've got enough of my own experiences. I don't need to hunt other experiences as much as I like them. But how do I start building with my own experiences and my own knowledge? So that's just my take on it. So I don't take it as shallow. I just think it as it's almost a shift that I've started to make of, okay, I rely on people less to learn from their experiences because I have enough of my own. And it's not to shut them out, but to understand that I have enough knowledge to get most of this done. So then now let me be really specific about those experiences I want to get and what knowledge do I want to attain.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
we've talked a lot about what you do for a job, and I definitely want to spend some time talking about the voice acting because I find that the most it's the most recent thing you've been working on. You've been doing a lot of cool things there, but what does downtime look like for you?
Downtime. It's very random.
Because all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So come on, you got to have some downtime in there, right?
Downtime for me is I'm finding more and more of my downtime is watching a series with my wife. We recently binged to catch up with Game of Thrones. And it's I like watching TV shows. The TV shows or documentaries really inspire me. It used to be video games just because I like the creation part of it, and it refreshes my gears. But now more days I just want to hear stories. I want to see fun stories, or I want to hear fun life journeys on my free time. So yeah, I've been watching we've been watching Westworld recently, and we're at the last episode of season 1. So if you watch it, don't tell me, but it's really good. And I'm very inspired by the acting in it. I'm very inspired by the storytelling. So that and eating food, I think those are the two things right now that are my downtime.
So you're a foodie.
Sure. I like to take food and shove it into me. That's
so I guess what I was getting at is a long time ago somebody said you can classify people in two broad ways. They're either foodies or fuelies. And fuelies are people that are just like, I have to eat, so I'm just going to do it. And foodies are the ones that really get into presentation and taste, and of course you can move back and forth between those, but some people really fall into one category or the other. And so are you more of a foodie or are you more of a fuelie?
A fuelie, for sure. I could eat the same thing every day, I think, but my wife is slowly introducing me to be more of a foodie and to be more picky. I mean, the whole idea of dieting is kind of new to me as well. And the whole idea of eating healthy over eating cheap in quantity is also kind of a new thing that I've started implementing in the last year or so. So it's starting to change, but I'd say I'm still a fuelie for the most part.
Yeah, and I'm that way because traveling so much for work, I have the 3 to 5 restaurants I can go to. And I eat them, and I know exactly what I'm going to get, and there's no surprises. And I think part of it is it's just I don't have to think about it. But with that being said, my wife is definitely more of the foodie, and so I like to go out and experience, different kind of foods and things of that nature. It's just kind of like you. If I had the choice of really trying to think a lot about it for a little gain on taste versus I know what this is and I know what I'm going to get, I'm always going to go towards the fuelie route. It's just easier.
Mm-hmm. I'd say being married that's one of the privileges is you can be both, because sometimes you're forced to be both.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it definitely opens up that. So downtime. Sounds like you spend a lot of time with family, which is awesome. Another thing I'm thinking about is because you've been exposed to a lot of scripts and I'm assuming you read a lot and so on, exposed to a lot of things like that. Do you have a favorite quote or maybe joke that comes to mind, like just something that, just a quote that kind of sticks with you?
Well, a recent quote actually, and it was from watching Jordan. Do you know who Jordan Peterson is?
I do.
I really respect what he's doing for the world right now with all of his with all of his debates and all of his talking to people. He said something that sparked something in me, which was along the lines of working or trying to figure out happiness or trying to work to be happy is kind of false. Like happiness is kind of the aftermath of working to promote the best you possible. I feel like for the longest time I've been trying to find out what makes me happy. And I think that's important to reflect on, but it's a wrong way to reflect on it in terms of goals. I think your goal should be to work towards something that not that you're happy doing, but you're really good at doing, and then the result leads to the happiness. And just that perspective alone kind of helping me shift into like third gear here and like really push forward as an artist and hold myself responsible to what I'm doing with my art.
So do you think focusing more on the struggle or the journey that's in there is that what you think he's actually referencing within there is looking at the work you're putting in and the development? Don't always just focus on like the end goal, which is happy, but the journey itself.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's very much it. I think we try to skip that journey. I think we try to skip immediately to happiness, but really what makes us happy is the journey. And what makes humans happy in general is the struggle, because we like obstacles. And as soon as we get rid of the obstacles, there's nothing to maneuver around. We get bored and then we're not happy, which is why a lot of, we read about a lot of rich people being unhappy. And like, we look at that as selfish, but at the same time, it's like, oh, they've lost their obstacle. So I feel like the obstacle is something that we should focus more on and less on happiness, because that is an aftermath result of working hard and, finding your journey towards achieving what you would like to. It's just a perspective change. I think for me, it was an eye opener, because like, would you rather just snap your fingers and have the perfect body, or would you rather go to the gym every day? Would you rather feel the pain? Would you rather see the evolve, gain the knowledge, and then have that body, even if it takes you a couple of years versus tomorrow? And the selfish person in me would say, well, I want that body. But the more I think about it, no, I would rather have the journey to get there, because the achievement of going through that process is actually what I yearn for, because that's the fun part, I guess, that the best part of life is that moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the journey is the interesting part. That's where in line. So one of my favorite quotes is chance favors the prepared. And I think that kind of goes along with the same idea of, going along the journey, you keep picking up experiences, waiting for a window of opportunity to open up. And hopefully you've had enough preparedness that it may look like chance to the outsider. This is the whole overnight success deal. But really it was something that you were working on and struggling over for a certain time frame before that opportunity came up. And I think it's I think keeping yourself on the journey, as long as it doesn't feel like a hamster wheel, is definitely it's definitely a great way to keep good perspective. So
for sure,
voiceover, I really want to touch on this with you before we get close to signing off on this. So I guess first, for my own terminology, what do you call it? Is it voiceover? Is it voice acting? Is there a difference between the two?
Well, voiceover is the craft. Voice acting is my craft in that craft. So I call it both. I would say voiceover is kind of the whole thing. Voice acting is my part. Because in voiceover, even if you're not doing it, you're still engineering it, or if you're not engineering it, you're producing it. Because in those quality things, there's a family to it. So yeah, I call it voiceover work, but I call myself a voice actor.
Gotcha. So the voice acting is one part of what goes into making the voice over in a big overarching sense, the finished product. So in voice acting itself, one of the things I'm interested in, if you were to meet somebody brand new off the street and they wanted to get into it, what kind of guidance would you give them that would help them get to 50% or 70% of a skill set to where they might actually have something to to step in the studio with? Like, how do you even start with the whole, how would you help some person?
Well, I would ask them, is this because you want to make easy money because you heard it was a fun way of making money, or is it because you like acting? Is it because you like you think you have a unique voice that you would like to share with everybody else, and you're willing to go through that process? It all starts with you have to have the right mentality of realizing how difficult it is to get into the industry, and two, you have to understand what having a knack for it really means. Like, if someone tells you, if somebody in, I get this all the time, if somebody in Starbucks tells you, wow, you have a nice voice, you should do radio or something, and then you take that as, yeah, I should, and I want to do that. I think you just have to make sure that the passion is really there, and it's not just this is another avenue. Because if you want to make that your career, that's a whole different story. As I just want to pursue this to have some fun, or I want to pursue this to prove a friend that I can do it. I don't know. So I would start with that question to gauge what level you would want to do, and then I would say voiceover nowadays is a pay-to-play situation where it's if you really want to get into the industry, you should probably take lessons, or you should probably take a class from the agencies that can get you to that next level, because it's such a saturated environment. So in order to get through that saturation, you kind of have to play the game, which is paying for class. So that would be step 2. And then step 3 is just constantly practice. Like, I would say, if you want to do voiceover and you think you have a knack for it, you should be able to read pages after pages after pages of script with very little error. And not only error as in word error, but also phrasing. I would probably say learn how to phrase a sentence, learn the beginnings to the endings of an English sentence and the structure of it. And then once you have that down, maybe learn how people say things and why people say things a certain way with the inflections, depending on the situation. And then you have to know, it's a very complicated thing, but overall if you have the passion to do this, you should, number one, you should make sure that you're in it for the long haul, because it takes forever to get into it. Number 2, you kind of have to pay to play. You have to take classes. You have to adapt. You have to learn who the casting directors are. You have to learn who the directors are, who your competition is, what the realities of your voice being in a certain genre of something. Because there are many types of voiceover. There's promo, there's commercial, there's animation, there's ESL, which I do a mixture of all of that. But if your voice is very unique, maybe it only fits into a couple categories. And if you're willing to be in that category, then go for it. But if you wanna break boundaries, then that's gonna take a long time. Does that answer that question?
Oh yeah. It makes sense. I mean, I like the idea. One, is this a hobby or is this a passion? That seems really good. 2, go, and it's kind of interesting that you say pay to play, because really what it sounds like you're trying to do is you need to, 1, pay to get the skill set, or at least that level of coaching, like we talked about earlier, the real focused coaching. But also there's a a networking portion to that. And I think that's interesting because, the pay to play portion, okay, yes, you're going to get the training, but it's kind of a way to keep the hobbyists out of the industry. In a way, it's like, if you're not going to pony up with some money to better yourself, then why should anybody take you seriously? So that's interesting, that's in there as well. And then it also, like, the last part is just practice the foundational skill set, which is something that you'll need regardless of the category you go down. So yeah, that made a lot of sense. I mean, if somebody just getting started in here, it's like, all right, for your next, 3 to 6 months, this is going to be your life, and you may not get a job, but this is what you're going to have to do in order to have a marketable skill that that you can take. That makes a lot of sense. So the networking portion, if we go all the way back to the Broadway play, I know you've been on tour where you traveled around the country, and then the voice acting. How has networking impacted some of those opportunities? Or actually, more importantly, like, how do you see networking within this community, and how do you effectively network?
Oh, okay. So it depends on the people you're networking with. I find that for a few of the jobs that I go in for, like the potentials with producers, like I do a lot of readings, and I've done a few readings that have the potential to go to Broadway in a big caliber way. I feel like in those situations, you have to be nice. You have to be open-minded, especially if you're new. Like, the networking for me is just not to get in their way and not to disappoint and study your material and make sure you're on point with the material. And then they call you back, and then they say thank you. If it's for smaller things, like, I don't say smaller as insignificant, but just newer form of it. Like, I do a lot of readings. Readings are essentially read-throughs of a potential show, but you're reading from a script. There's no choreography or movement really incorporated, and it's still in its work. So you can always change the work. It's not finalized. I do a lot of readings for NYU, which is a lot of new stuff. And for that, I like to be very open and honest with the creative team, because those are the people that make or break the future of that piece in your career. And I find the more closed off you are with them, the less interested they are in you. Whereas in a professional setting, like at a high caliber show, the more involved that you try to become with them, the less interested they are with you. So that for musicals, at least, that is how I network. I try to gauge the situation of, how high of a caliber is this? What level am I at? And what is my place? And for voiceover, it's the same thing ideally, except for what's great about voiceover, at least the stuff I'm doing, is it's a one-on-one. You're not usually in a group of people. You're not competing against others. Once you get in that room, it's just you. So you have the opportunity to just be yourself, to be organically human. And the more human you are, they like it. The more professional you are and closed off, the more, not professional, I should say, the more closed off you are into yourself, the less interested they are, depending on the company. But yeah, it varies. It just depends on the level.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to understand the people you're working with and what do they really want out of you. It sounds like those high caliber jobs, they're, hiring a set skill set, and this is really all they want. It almost sounds like the whole you speak when spoken to kind of standpoint.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas with potentially, and again, like you said, not just us, it's not a small job with regards to role, but are they looking for you to bring in some creative input, not just a voice or a dancing body or something of that nature? Like, they're actually looking for you to bring your craft in to the position. So no, that's a very good point when it comes to networking and how to effectively deal with those different situations.
Right. Oh, and I guess I would say if anyone's listening to this that wants to be maybe an actor in the future, you should know the difference between giving your creative input and not. Producers and directors do not give your creative input. They are the creative input. People who write the stuff, they're also the creative input, but they're more open, I think, to suggestions and bringing your own personality to it, because your creative input, therefore, is what the director would normally do. So you can bring some spice to that, to the aspect of your craft, as long as you're not changing words. Or if you're changing words, it's because the acting part of you says, I feel like the character that I'm trying to portray resonates more with this word, and then the writer can go, yes, that's the word that we should use, you're right, and then they change it for you. But if you say that to a director, they're going to be like, shut up and do your job, because I'm the one who decides whether or not that's a good choice. So I think finding that balance between creative input and not, surprisingly, comes from, you can be more creative with the creative team that wrote it. You probably shouldn't be as creative with the person who's trying to make you creative, which is the director or the producer. But that's just from my experience. I could be totally wrong on that.
No, that's really interesting when you bring that up. So it's like the director or producer is looking to you as a tool, which they're going to use to make their piece of art. Whereas in the writing portion, the art hasn't quite been made yet, so they're not exactly sure if you're a part of the team or are you just the tool set there, but they know you're integral to it. So yeah, that's probably a very healthy perspective, especially knowing people get very territorial when they feel like you're trying to smudge their thumbprint they're trying to put on something. So it's the phrase I heard recently, like, stay in your lane, bro. That kind of comes to mind when you're talking about it as well. So I want to be respectful of your time to start wrapping this up with one final question, and that is with regards to routines. And it's something I'm always interested in, is people who, like yourself, are successful within one area or just overall in life. Do you have any routines that when you're in them and you're in the groove, like the whole day is just more productive? And this could be, a morning, evening, lunch routine, or even something you do like right before you step into the booth for voice acting. Do you have any of those, and would you be willing to share them?
Oh, for sure. So there are a couple of routines, and this is straying from the artistic side, more of just the mental side for me, is my diet. That's the one thing I can totally control, I think. I'm finding that intermittent fasting is helping me, is really helping me feel more empowered within myself. Just, shedding that extra weight alone has changed my mental, my mental stature. I think it's helped me build a stronger me. So when I go to do these jobs, I'm more confident. I also feel like warming up. This is so terrible to say, but in my youth, I never really warmed up. Warmed up before a class, warmed up before rehearsal, warmed up before a job. I would just go in cold and expect my talents to be there. But the reality is, you have to constantly be warming up. You have to constantly be ready to go at your peak, and you won't be at your peak unless you hit those warm-ups first. So for me, it's like basic vocal exercises. Make sure that you at least are physically, do a few push-ups before you go into a movement call, or if you're acting, maybe read a few pages of stuff before you go into a cold read for voiceover. That's always helped me get into the groove of stuff. And it's those little maintenance routines that really help, at least for me, an actor, or my acting or performance life really thrive. I've noticed that the more things you can control as an artist, which is a very little amount within the artistic side and more about just you, the more control you have over achieving what you want, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Definitely sounds like you build the routines around the things that you, as you said, you control, and then that better prepares you for the rest of the things which you have no control over, and you just got to deal with as they come at you. So best to be stretched out and limber so you don't pull a hammy, right?
Exactly.
So to close this out, Daniel, how can people search for you, find your work, keep up with all the cool things that you're doing over the vast interwebs? What are some good ways that people can reach out and contact you and follow you?
Sure. If you type in Daniel J. Edwards in Google, I mean, most of my stuff comes up. I'm on Twitter as Daniel J. Edwards. I'm on Instagram as Daniel J. Edwards. I don't really use Facebook except for family stuff, so I'm not going to promote that. But even if you want to find me on Spotify, it's Daniel J. Edwards. I released a small EP of like a few songs. Yeah, so you can find me by typing my name in Google.
Fair enough. That's not a bad way to do it. And I'll make sure I'll get those links from you and we'll put those in the show notes. But Daniel, just want to say thank you very much. I had a fantastic time talking with you today. Really appreciate it. So thank you once again for being on the Growth Happens Dawn to Dusk podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Many thanks to Daniel J. Edwards for that fantastic interview. I think it was really insightful. I enjoyed it. I liked listening to how he changed his perspective in trying to seek a title and really going after experiences, and how that has actually allowed him to grow faster and take on more opportunities than when he first got into the business, as well as expanding into voiceover work. So really insightful stuff. Definitely connect with him online all over the place. I'll have his links in the show notes below so you guys can check out him, as well as my connections as well throughout the interweb. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all those places, as well as iTunes. So leave me a 5 stars, review, anything like that will help. So once again, everybody, I really appreciate you listening to this. And just remember, growth happens between dawn and dusk.